Welcome to Tikvah Radio Show, the sound of hope. I'm Liliana Inez, your host. Someone once said that God speaks to people in different ways. Did you ever have dreams, visions, or a special experience in which you felt God was speaking to you? The Torah tells us that Abraham, Jacob, and many others heard and experienced God. Does Adonai speak to people like that nowadays? On Tikvah Radio, we interview people who have had an encounter with the God of Israel, a special experience. Some have even had personal miracles, and all have found the Messiah of Israel. Stay tuned to Tikvah Radio Show and hear an amazing story of someone who was encountered by God. Welcome, Mishpocha. We're so glad that you joined us today. Our guest is Mimi Feinsilver. Welcome to Tikvah Radio Show, Mimi. Glad to have you here with us.
Oh, I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's good to have you here. So, Mimi, you were born in the Catskills in New York. Tell us your story.
Oh, Sure, that was interesting. I mean, most of the people came to the Catskills. It was also known as the Borscht Belt. It was like the birthplace of comedians, Henny Youngman, Buddy Hackett, all of the comedians. And I grew up there, and mostly a lot of New York City people came there for their vacation. It was a time when Jewish people were really discriminated against. My father told me, he would show me a sign that would say restricted. And he was like, that means that's us, Mimi. We're the ones who are restricted. They don't want us. And so the Catskills was a place that, as a whole, Jewish people could feel safe. There was no restriction against them. I don't know, maybe the Gentiles felt a little restricted. I don't know. But it was a resort hotel that started as little tiny bungalow colonies when the first immigrants came over, and they didn't have that much money. And little by little, it grew into some very fancy hotels, resort areas. I grew up as one of the country bumpkins that the New York City slickers came and looked down on us like, oh, really? You live here? But it was an interesting place to live.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you to back off from your phone just a little bit because there's a little bit of, there you go.
To it. Okay.
Awesome. So did you have a formal religious training? Did you go to synagogue? What was your life like as a Jewish girl?
Well, the truth is there was only one synagogue in Ellenville, even though it was 90% Jewish population. It was an Orthodox synagogue. And so I remember every Friday night we would drive to synagogue, and the synagogue was on the top of the hill, so everybody parked down below the hill, and as if they were walking because you weren't supposed to drive. And I would ask my dad, it's like, doesn't the rabbi know that all the cars are down here? But we would walk up there, and then Mom and I would walk more. We'd walk upstairs because the balcony was for the women upstairs. And I never really understood that much of what was going on because all the women were talking. Every once in a while I'd look down and I'd see my dad doing something down below. I remember being told stories. I went to the Jewish youth group, and I remember one time, I got a really clear picture of God. I just remember this so clearly. I was in this youth group, and they were telling one of the stories, I guess, and I suddenly, I knew who God was. He was a judge. He was up on the clouds. He had a big judge's robe, and he had a really big gavel, and I knew that gavel was coming for me. And that's really the way I saw God at that point.
Wow, that doesn't sound very friendly.
No, it's not someone you really wanted to approach,
right. It wasn't a comfortable relationship.
No.
Yeah. So there was something unusual that happened to you when you were in a Girl Scout troop. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's really interesting because I guess there'd never been, I had, like I said, there were a couple of Gentiles in Ellenville, and I had one or two that were my best friends, I thought. And I was at the Girl Scout meeting, and it changed. It ended up being in a Catholic church, and I saw a crucifix. And the first time your eyes see that, there's like these nails there. I think it was very graphic. If I remember right, there was blood. You know, the color of red was on the crucifix. But I sort of knew this was important to some people. And we would hold hands at the end saying, "Day is done, God the Son." And I would look at the crucifix while we were singing, going, "What happened? Did this really happen to somebody?" And there was just this weird thing that I knew I couldn't ask my parents anything about it. Yeah, that's just weird. How you know that, I don't know. But you're Jewish and you're not supposed to ask questions about Jesus. So I just always wondered about it. And it was kind of like, that's another world, that's other people's world, not mine. And it was just the kind of mystery of other people. Right. And yeah, I guess I thought it was Jesus Christ, but I didn't know who he was at all. And I didn't connect him with the God that was up on the clouds, you know, with the gavel. So I don't know. When you're young, you don't connect the dots very much, I don't think. At least I didn't. I mean, I did grow up because, like I said, I had Gentile friends. My dad did tell me maybe once, maybe more, you know, if you want to have Gentile friends, don't forget, all they want to do is convert you. And, you know, the first time that you have an argument or you marry a man who's not Jewish, the first thing you're going to do is bring up your being Jewish and have some very nasty words about it. So that was kind of the veil that was over everything that was not of our Jewish world.
Any interesting things happened to you as a teenager? You know, that kind of changed anything in your thoughts about God, or was it pretty much the same way? I'm sorry.
I think I was like a lot of people of my generation. I was born in 1966. I started looking into Eastern religion. I ended up I decided I wanted to be an actress when I was about 7 years old. I saw a Natalie Wood movie, and that was like, oh, I want to be like her. But from there, I really, really wanted to be an actress for its own sake and enjoyed it. Did some community theater when I was in the Catskills. And I went to college and majored in theater at college. But I got into drugs. I got into meditation. I even got my own mantra at one point, just anything. And the thought of the God of the Bible I ran from it. You know, I remember talking to friends who were in theater, and one of them was writing a play, and we talked like, we should study the Bible. There's really good stories in there, and you can take things from that and make symbolism and stuff like that. But other than that, there was no consideration, of looking into the Bible.
So when you got into meditation and everything, did you feel like that really connected to God, or was just sort of an experience?
I think just an experience. That was all. The only time, it's funny because my dad, he was upset about the meditation. He was like, we're Jewish. We shouldn't be Jewish. And he wasn't religious. My mother tried in the beginning. I have memories of this, of her trying to light the candles on Friday night and Shabbat. And Dad would say, we don't have to do that anymore. We're Americans now. And so Dad was not a religious man at all, but he was really the one most concerned, I guess, about our Jewish identity, which I appreciate now, truthfully.
But he kind of was telling you that meditation wasn't a good thing. No,
because it was taking me away from my Jewishness,
That's interesting.
And I mean, I had some experience. I think there's in all of our hearts, eternity is in there. The call for eternity is in there. And I could trace back so many things, even when I was in theater. I went one time to see a play called Brand by Henrik Ibsen. And it was all about, really, with this whole long story, I realized that the underlying theme was returning to Eden, that we had been lost since Eden and we're returning back. And they just grabbed me somehow. And I would talk to my friends in theater and say things like, doesn't that amaze you? Isn't there a truth there? And they'd look at me like, I was a Martian or something,
Wow. So
yeah,
that was really,
I mean, it's like they grab a hold of a lot of things, but any time there was something deep that was being pulled, and I knew that, and it all came together at one moment. So, Yeah.
So you were feeling a pull and tried to share that with people around you, and they weren't getting it. But you were feeling,
I wasn't trying to I was asking them, do they feel the same thing? There was the play Grand that was very much about the return to Eden. And one time there was an American Public Theater Shakespeare Festival, and they had Oedipus Rex, the Greek tragedy, and during that they decided to go ahead and add to it, and they had gospel singers come in during the play, the acting out of Oedipus Rex, and they had something like the Fountain Boys of Alabama, and they were just gospel singers, and something about them also just like causes yearning in my heart. And I remember bringing it up to one friend in particular, and she looked at me again like I was nuts.
Wow.
And yeah, so anyway, you can trace that back after you have a relationship with God, and you're like, oh, he was calling me from so early on. And it's a beautiful thing that it didn't just happen all at once, but he was calling you from the beginning.
So you feel like he was calling you, he was seeking you out, and other people didn't feel that way, but you were. It's like God was tapping you on the shoulder and saying, "This is me. This is me." It's really cool.
Well, it was just a deeper place of there's got to be more to this. There was one time I remember when I was very young, I was at a friend's house in her kitchen, and I wasn't liking being there. The mother and the friend were not nice. And I was just sitting there, and suddenly this thought flew by me, but there's more to this. And I tried to grab hold of it. I remember making a fist, because I was trying to grab a hold of whatever just flew by. And that stayed with me at least till I was 20. Whenever I'd suddenly go, what was that thought again that told me there's more? And I would end up making a fist because I just wanted to know what it was, and I finally gave up. I'll never find it. But again, when I did become a believer, all of that came back, and it's like from the day in my friend Mary Ann's kitchen, God was calling me.
Wow.
And it's like a jigsaw puzzle, and there's one piece that puts it all together.
Wow. So
yeah, and that part I think is people who maybe are not even considering reading the Bible or whatever, that yearning is there somewhere, and it breaks my heart. I see people chasing after things that they think are going to fill them, that are what they're chasing after, and I did too. I chased after a bunch of garbage.
Yes, everybody chases after something because we have something that God put inside of us that He's the only one that fits in there. So there's this hunger, and you chase after different things until, by God's grace, you find Him, which is the one that fits in there. You know, like the missing piece of the puzzle of your heart. Yeah. So in your 20s, you moved to Manhattan to pursue a career. Can you share with us about that?
Oh, sure. That was my dream. I mean, I grew up in the Catskills because my parents did not want to raise a child in Manhattan in New York City because it was too dangerous. And I spent my whole teenage years trying to get to Manhattan. I wrote aunts and uncles, like, can I live with you? I wanted to be in theater very much. I had done apprenticeships in summer stock before I got out of high school. And eventually, I made it into Manhattan, started going on auditions. I got my 8x10 glossy, all of that. And in the beginning, after a while, I had auditioned. I had different parts. I auditioned for commercials. And I got involved in that world. And it just became, that in itself was empty. I remember one day I was in an improv company, and we took curtain calls afterwards. And this thought came to me, and it was so real and so frightening. It was like, how much applause is going to be enough? And it was like, there'll never be enough. And I knew it was a dirty little secret that everyone else felt too, but they wouldn't say it. And that was where I was. Anyway, I kept looking at Eastern religion and all kinds of stuff like that. And along the way, pursuing some terrible relationships with men.
Yeah, you said in your bio that you you were looking for something in that career, but you've got a lot of something else.
Rejection, yes, yeah. Rejection. Like I must have been addicted to rejection, you know, from auditions where they're like, next, and you're gone, to, thankfully, I think with most relationships, boyfriends, it was like I went next because they were very destructive, very hurtful. And whether they rejected me or I ran because I realized I was seeing danger ahead, but that's where I was. And I guess I look at it now and I'm like, thank you, God, that you showed me and I didn't get destroyed by any of the choices I had made.
Yeah, this is a side of stardom that you don't often hear. Definitely, you don't hear about that in, you know, the magazines that, you know, sell putting photographs of famous people and, you know, the little blurbs about their life. You don't hear that. There's this whole aura on that career. And but for most people, there's a few that quote unquote make it and they're supposed to be, you know, on the top and happy. And then later on you find out they have a drug addiction or an alcohol addiction or went through a lot of spouses or, you know, had problems. But you don't often hear that for the most part. Most people that go into that career, it's one rejection after the other.
Yeah, exactly. And then what happens, so you make it in a very highly competitive field, and you think, well, now I better be happy. And what if you're not? You know, what if you realize something is still lacking?
Well, we've seen that with different actors and singers and stuff, that their life ends tragically at a young age, or, you know, they just go downhill in some areas, or, you know, maybe they have a good publicist and they still look good, but, you know, only God knows, you know, behind all that, what's true.
Yes.
Yeah. So then you weren't able to make it into that, and you started doing something else. You tried some writing. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, what happened, it was funny because it was a time, Sylvester Stallone had made the movie Rocky. And it was like, well, if you guys aren't going to cast me in something, I'll write my own story of my own movie. And Whoopi Goldberg had actually done a one-woman show. And I think she got attention because of my name. People found it really cute. And she did a one-woman show. I went to it, and it was like, I don't want to insult anyone, but I was not impressed. And I was like, why are they making such a big deal? So I thought, okay, well, I'll just write my own vehicle, just like they did, and I'll propel myself to stardom, you know? So I wrote something, actually, the first thing I wrote was Tammy Goes on a Fast. And that was interesting, but that was a whole other thing. And then and I got some success. I had some staged readings in a theater that Geraldine Page and her husband had at the time. And actually, Harry Belafonte's daughter, who was half Jewish, she played the Jewish girl in my play. But from there, I figured, well, I'm successful. I want to try to write something else. And the other one was about a Jewish girl growing up in the Catskills who kept saying, I'm searching for grace. I want grace. And what I was picturing was she felt like a klutz, and she wanted to be graceful like a ballerina. And I actually had her go to her rabbi and say, how do I find grace? And the rabbi's like, I don't know. And I was writing that at the time that there was just a lot of questioning going on. And there was actually a point in which I wrote about blood sacrifice in there, that to find grace, there had to be some blood. It sounds very weird, but I just understand it all now, where those things came into play. But in writing that, something inside of me said, I'm really searching. Something is more.
So this blood sacrifice, do you think that was back with the temple and the atonement and all that? Maybe kind of subconscious that you were...
yeah. I believe, it's saying grace, I interpreted it one way, and after I came to believe in Jesus as he's revealed in the New Testament, suddenly the word grace had an incredibly beautiful meaning to me. And I remember the first time I sang Amazing Grace after I had accepted the Lord. And I couldn't stop crying because suddenly I understood the meaning of the word Amazing Grace. And at that point, I went back and I looked at my notes and everything I'd written from this play. And I was like, that's what it had to have been. I was really looking for it. The word grace had no meaning before that to me that I knew of. And blood sacrifice, somewhere deep, I believe, if we're, you know what? There's a movie, Frankenstein. Frankenstein, the monster, is like looking all over for his creator. And I believe that's true of all of us to some degree. And God has put, he's put like a map inside of us, and we go tracing after it to see where the truth is. And I don't know, some people just decide they don't want to go any further with it. They give up. You know, there's different things that steal the seed. But it was a quest that I had to find the answer to. And even if I gave myself the excuse that it was so that I can finish this play, I do want to understand what it means that there has to be atonement for blood. That's really what the play went from different aspects, but it was called Killjoy at one point. And at that point was when she knew that to find joy, there had to be atonement and it had to be covered in blood. It's too abstract.
Wow.
But I can watch other people's movies or plays, and they're not Bible believers. But I hear the clues, the things that are going on. Woody Allen, oh my goodness, that man wrote a movie that he is so close and yet so far from what I see as reality. Anyway, it gets very abstract, but it's real. It's very real to me.
So how did so you're writing plays and you're having some plays on stage. Did this one was this one on stage as well?
No, this one never got beyond I think because I was searching, trying to find answers, I kept kind of ripping it up and starting over. Like I said, it started with a Jewish comedian and then it went to something else. But I mean, I look at it now and it was just my hieroglyphics, trying to find an answer.
Right. And so in your writing, in a way, you're kind of working some things out in your heart. I mean, you're trying to do your own career because you wanted parts to play, and now you're actually making plays where other people are playing. And in the process, you're kind of searching, trying to look deep inside as to what is the meaning of life. What's a really important thing about life? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. My mother got diagnosed with cancer at that point, and I grew, actually after my parents, growing up in the Catskills, Mom was from Alabama. So my parents retired to Alabama, and I went down there to visit. My father passed away, and Mom had cancer. So I went down there to visit her, and she was in the hospital, and I would come home every evening from the hospital, and I saw these photographs. Mom was young once and very vital. Mom was 49 when I was born. I was an only child. So I never knew Mom as anything but old. And I saw these pictures and I thought, good golly, there's got to be more to this life. This is it. So I'm never going to get younger, and all the fun I think I should have as a hedonist or something, it's going to end and I'm going to be an old lady. And all of that played in my thinking about where am I going, what does it mean, all of that was just in the last 1 year. And somehow I kept thinking in the middle of that, I remember writing in my journal that I was looking for the great God, the savior of love or something like that. I met this guy who, he was German, and I saw him, a friend of mine was having their film shown at the Gay and Lesbian Film Festival. And so I went because my friend Tom's movie was going to be there. And an actor who was in Tom's film was there. And afterward, we all went out. And this man, Peter, who was Tom's friend, had a semi-mohawk hairdo, and it was kind of dyed green. And he went to the bathroom, came back out, and his nose was sniffing. You know, it was kind of obvious what he was doing in the bathroom. And I was so lost that I thought, oh, he's cute. And I get it. I got involved with Peter. And Peter had what he called a born-again experience. And he started telling me he would get drunk, he would get high on drugs, either one, and he would start reading to me from his King James Bible. And he would explain that I was going to go to hell. And I didn't get any of it. At one point I said, okay, great, here's this Nazi, because he had a very strong German accent, and you're telling me this Jewish girl about Jesus. You got to be nuts. Maybe you need him, but I don't. But it got my attention. It's so hard to explain, but he talked about a God who was very, very specific, and he had a name for God. And that God used this man, Peter, to show me my need for a Savior. Because when Peter first started and said he died for your sins, I was like, I'm not a sinner. Are you nuts? You're a sinner. Look at the things you've done. I'm not a sinner. Why would he die for me? And because I started getting more and more hungry for something real to hold on to, and my life was falling apart because of Peter. And I had one girlfriend who said, I can't be your friend anymore because you're destroying yourself. And everything started falling apart. Even theater friends realized something was wrong. And one day I prayed. I got down on my knees like my mom had taught me to. And I said, God, who is Jesus? Should I believe in him? And I was so afraid, really, that I was going to get hit by lightning. Talking to the God I grew up with and mentioning the name of Jesus was kind of scary. But I said, tell me, about him. And I'd say for the next couple of weeks to a month, and Peter during that time wanted us to either move in together or get married, and I said no. So he said, well, I'm going back to San Francisco, which is where he had prayed a prayer to receive Jesus, and even though he wasn't acting like he believed. So he went back to San Francisco. I was alone, and during that month or so, I remember being on a subway in different places, and I'd break down crying, because I suddenly realized what I took pride in, that I was a survivor. I had friends who overdosed on drugs, who did some really horrible things. And I realized it wasn't me. It wasn't me who did it. And there's something really horrible inside of me that could take me down a path that I could never save myself from. And there's a lot of evil, or just darkness inside of me. And it was scary to see that. And I understand now that that was God's answer to showing me how much I needed somebody to save me from myself, from my sin. And being confused, and Peter went back to San Francisco. He got involved with a church where he had had an encounter with God from, and he started calling me, and he sounded better. So I thought, well, I booked a flight to San Francisco, and within, I think, the first day, I said, I'm tired of trying to rehabilitate you. You're right. There's no meaning to life. Let's just get high and have a good time. And Peter actually said, no, that's not true. And he led me in a prayer that I repeated after him, where I said, I am a sinner. I know, Jesus, you died for my sins. Come into my life, and I will make you Lord. I prayed that, and I just knew something had changed. It was, I'd go to the bathroom to be alone from Peter, and I realized I had an open channel to God, and so I'd start talking to him, and it just, everything was different after that. And he took me to the church he went to, and it was during Easter time, which is amazing, and because I would have thought nothing was more foreign to me as a Jew. But he took me to this church, and they said, oh, you met your Messiah, because they heard my last name. And I wanted a Savior. I needed someone to hold me up. And when they said that, and there was an actual connection to who I was as a Jew, it's like, really? That's who Jesus is? all this time, the churches have been celebrating my Messiah. So that everything started falling in place, including the missing jigsaw puzzle.
Wow. So I bet you were shocked when you found out Jesus was the Jewish Messiah.
Oh, completely. Completely. And then it's an exciting experience to have all the pieces start. You read the Bible and all the things you heard growing up. And I mean, I heard we're waiting for the Messiah. I don't think there's a Jewish person, even in the younger generations, that haven't been taught that in some way. And whatever interpretation we were given of who the Messiah was, it just resonated that that's who he was. And little by little, from there, I met other Jewish. I went back to New York City, and I met other Jewish believers. And I was discipled by a woman who was a Jewish believer. And it just came into place in an incredible way.
So you said a little bit before this that you suddenly, after you said that prayer, you realized you had a direct communication line to Jesus, like to the Jewish Messiah. So what does that mean to you? What were you having that you didn't have before? What was happening in your life? What was happening in your heart? How did you hear him talking to you? What did he say to you?
Well, I remember I started reading after I said the prayer with Peter, and I had been reading. He left his Bible back in my apartment when he went to San Francisco, and I tried reading it. And my filmmaker, Tom, actually said, well, why don't you try Ecclesiastes? Maybe that'll help. And all that did was reaffirm what I felt, that all life was vanity. But after I prayed the prayer with Peter, he said, start with the Gospel of John. And from the moment I started reading, in the beginning was the Word was with God, it was like I wanted to just take those pages and just like press them to my heart. I mean, it was everything I was longing for, that I was hungry for. I couldn't get enough. And I guess Jesus made God so real. So, I mean, now that I know, I understand theology, I've read the Bible more, I understand he's my advocate. He's the one, without him, there's no way to the Father. I understand that now, and Jesus is God. But at that point, it just made everything real. And I understand much more now that I was born again. And God's Spirit came. I tried reading the Bible before I said that prayer, and I received nothing but just frustration. I literally threw that Bible across my living room floor before I said that prayer. Afterward, I couldn't get enough, and I know now that it was just his Spirit came to live inside of me, and communication was, the connection was there.
So how did that make you feel? How did that make you feel on the inside when you started having that conversation and that communication line? What changed in Mimi? What changed in you?
Sure. First of all, I think that one of the things I felt was I was no longer alone. I was an only child, and my parents were older. I never felt they understood me. And I would pray, and there'd be this experience that he's really hearing me. He knows what I'm saying. I never, ever felt alone again. I remember the first time somebody was going on like an interview, and I was going to say good luck. And I was like, wait a minute, it's not luck. There is a loving, all-powerful God who's in control of everything. And so just that sense that there was someone all-powerful who loved me and had my life in his hands. And just not, just having a Lord who would be the one who would give me parameters. He'd tell me in making my decisions what was right and what was wrong. Because before that, it was just whatever felt right, I did it, and boy, it ended up a mess. So I think ultimately I never had a problem with, okay, he's my Savior, I'm glad he died for my sins, but I'll still do what I want. I was so grateful to have the God who created me, who created this world, tell me how to live, what to do. And he gave me the power to obey. That my life turned around from the inside first, and then circumstantial things happened that changed everything.
That's a good point, because how many times people, like say they have a weight problem, or they got to give up cigarettes, and they try to do things in their own ability. Sometimes, they make it and everything, but maybe that same hunger for obsession for something, goes into some other area. That's exactly a lot of times what happens when you're trying to do it in your own ability. But with Messiah, with Jesus, He gives you a change of heart, and the change of heart is what makes the difference, because then your action to do something better for yourself comes out after there's a change of heart. And that's something that He does for you that we can't do for ourselves. Do you think
exactly?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, at that point in the beginning, I had filthy language. My mother used to be so upset. She said, "You talk like a truck driver." As soon as I said that in prayer, my language just changed. I don't remember ever swearing again. But beyond that, even more powerful, I went back to New York, and then Peter called and said he wanted to come back to New York and live with me. And I said, "Oh, okay." I just didn't think about it at first. But I had been enjoying such a peace and the presence of God just with me continually. I knew He was there. And I'd given up cigarettes. Just I had no desire for that after that. After I told Peter he could come back, suddenly I felt this kind of dark cloud, and the presence of God wasn't there, and I wanted a cigarette. And I thought, this is weird. And the woman who had been discipling me just about that time called up and said, "How you doing?" I said, "Well, I don't know. I'm kind of confused." And I told her, and she said, "Well, God's not a God of confusion." And she helped me to realize what God's commands are in that regard. And He helped me to obey, mainly because I loved Him, and I didn't want to inhibit His presence. I don't want to do anything to lose that.
Yeah, and then you were feeling that the decision you were making about going back to Peter and living together, not in the covenant of marriage, and then that kind of started bringing the old desires of the old life.
Exactly. I don't want to get too, but I had no moral parameters anymore, because the people I hung out with didn't either. When my friend who discipled me said, "God's not a God of confusion," I said, "Well, I don't know." She said, "Well, God hates fornication, Vinny." And I said, "Well, what's fornication?" I literally did not understand the biblical definition that it is, just like you said, in the covenants of marriage, and it set me free.
Awesome. And so that cloud just came off of you.
Oh, I felt God's presence in me. I called Peter back and said, "You can't come." And then I just felt God's presence, and God walked me through. He brought people to be there to help me for about a year, as I kind of was, my legs could have been a lot more wobbly in the beginning. But I had very strong, beautiful friends who knew the Lord, who were I'd say most of them were Jewish, and they understood the kind of shell shock as a Jewish person coming to find who Jesus was and loving Him above all.
Was your mom, did she know about you receiving Jesus? And if so, what was her reaction?
Well, I think at first she said, excuse me, she was happy because she knew that she was very afraid. She knew that her daughter was in a long distance away, was making terrible decisions, and she's a mother. I know she heard my voice and knew that I was in a lot of pain. And she just said she was happy for me. She wasn't happy when I tried to preach to her as much, but I started asking for prayer for my mom because she still had cancer. She had treatment. And if I can skip ahead, I went from New York. Within a year, I went to Chicago and started studying at Moody Bible Institute to give me just such a great foundation of understanding. And God had a surprise for me there. I'm probably making this a very long interview, and I'm sorry, but I do have to say one incredible thing. Peter came back in my life and kept trying to get back. And I went to a picnic that was mostly all Jewish believers. A woman I'd never met came over to me and said, I don't know why, but I feel God wants me to tell you this. I saw a comic strip on this Christian magazine, and it had a young girl who had this puka shell necklace, and she was like, really loved it. And her daddy called her in and said, would you give me the puka shell necklace? And she said, no, I didn't want to give it. She did give it to him. And then he called her back a couple of frames later in the comic strip, and he's got a real pearl necklace that he gives her. And so this woman told me the story, and I knew right away that God was saying, give up Peter. You know, he is not real pearls. And that gave me the strength, and I did that. And then I moved to Chicago, and God introduced me to my pearl necklace. His name is Michael Feinsilver.
Wonderful.
Yeah, that was an incredible surprise. God is amazing.
That's
totally
wonderful.
Amazing. Yeah.
So you were married, and how did your life change, and what happened next for you?
Well, and I'll cut it short. I know I've probably taken like a mini series or something.
No, we're doing well. We're doing good.
Thank you, Mom. Thank you so much. Mom was in Montgomery. She was alone at this point, and my husband and I, Michael, we got married in her living room. She had fallen and broke her hip, and so she really couldn't make it to Chicago. So we had a wedding in her living room, and we ended up moving down there within about a year after that. And it was because other things we wanted to do didn't work out. We wanted to go into ministry, and God redirected us to Montgomery, Alabama. And we stayed with Mom for a while, got our own home, got involved with church there. And through that, Michael's parents, who were in Chicago, had retired to South Florida, to Broward County. And we'd come down to visit. And it's a very Jewish area. And my husband he's a natural evangelist. And he would share, whether we were in the elevator at his parents' condo or in the deli there, he would bring up conversation and find a way to bring Jesus into it. And it was a very common thing for the people that he shared with to go, I never heard anybody explain it like that. And every time we would come back home to Alabama from Florida, we said, somebody's got to be there to tell these people and to explain to them. And God opened doors for us to become missionaries, to be evangelists here in Broward County. We've been here a little over 10 years now. And we've had some debates with Dr. Michael Brown, a Jewish Christian apologist, and two different rabbis, a Reformed rabbi and then a conservative rabbi. We've done that, and we've had Bible studies in our home, and we just keep looking for God's direction, where to share with people. But that's the life that God carved out.
Did you continue to do writing? Did you continue writing?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I did. I had the idea for a while, because back in Montgomery, I was doing post-abortion counseling. I even did it in a prison. And the idea came to me, what if a Jewish woman started suffering from post-abortion trauma, and she turned out to be a rabbi's wife? So that kind of got a story going for me. By the time I moved to Florida, I started putting it together, and I guess I wrote it and was published about 3 years ago now, something like that. It's called Naomi, the Rabbi's Wife. And I've got, because I was in Moody, they wrote something about it in Moody Alumni magazine and a couple of other places it was featured. And so I've gotten things back from people who've read it, and I'm thrilled about that. And I'm now working on the sequel to it.
Oh, that's great.
And, so I love writing. It's where theater maybe once fulfilled me, this is becoming every character that I create in my novels, and I enjoy it.
I have a question for you. I know in the bio you talked about you and your husband being involved in different things in your local congregation, and that you volunteered at a crisis pregnancy center with that same thing about counseling women suffering with post-abortion trauma. How did you get in there? What brought you to that subject? I haven't heard anybody talking about that, and people don't usually talk much about the trauma after they have an abortion, but that's a real thing. And I mean, I don't ever read, I mean, I've never read an article, there's a lot of women out there, I'm sure, that are going through that, but, you know, they're talking about taboo. I think that's one of those taboo things that people don't talk about. So how did you get interested in that, and what brought you to, help women that are suffering with post-abortion trauma?
Well, I guess it started after I became a believer, and before that, I'd had 2 abortions, and it was just commonplace. The world I lived in, it was no big deal. It sounds terrible to say, but I started going to a congregation after I became a believer, and the man who was our pastor, him and his wife had 2 daughters, and it was New York City, and there was just not that many kids, you know. They were the only 2 children that needed like a nursery or something to take care of them, and I fell in love with those 2 girls. I mean, I just adored them, and I didn't think about it at first until I was at church one day, and they talked about meeting in front of an abortion clinic to do a demonstration or rescue, Operation Rescue, whatever, I can't remember the name. But it kind of hit me like, oh, God says that's wrong, doesn't he? And as soon as I did, I felt God say, you are forgiven. And that was something I clung to. I understood that that was something Jesus had died for with me, and I was forgiven. But the hurt from it, the regret, was still very much there, and just little barbs would come at me from inside, like, look what you did. And at the point that I married Michael, I volunteered back in Chicago for a crisis pregnancy center. And when they knew my past, they said, well, you're going to have to go through a post-abortion counseling group because we don't want a woman who is trying to make up for what you did in the past by trying to save another woman from not having an abortion. You need to be healed. And there's a difference I realize now between knowing you're forgiven and being healed. And so I went through the post-abortion counseling with a group, and I loved the fact that it dealt with the very aspect of how you made the decision, to the circumstances of your abortion, but it went so much deeper into forgiveness and acceptance, and even having a memorial afterward for your unborn child. Mm-hmm. And I just saw it meant a lot that it has to be done, because it's something people bury. The hurt of that they just can bury so deep, whether a man or a woman, you know, who have made that choice. It's a hurtful choice. And now that I'm older, it has the ramifications that all my friends have grandchildren, you know, and I never had children. Mm-hmm. So it's a sad decision, and if I can either help a woman not to make that choice, just think about it. Uh-huh. Not to just go with whatever anyone else has told her, but just realize what she's doing. And if somebody's hurting from it, to know God's forgiveness and the anger that sometimes is buried inside from that, for that to come and let God heal it.
Right. Well, we are just about done with our time. Is there something that you want to share right now that you haven't had a chance to share with our audience?
Thanks for asking. I think, how can I not think about anybody who might be listening who has not known the love of Jesus? And whether you're Jew or Gentile, and you have some myth of who he is and have not really experienced who he is, and the fact he's the ultimate reality, and the fact that all of us were born with sin in our hearts, and our nature has to be changed by only God himself having us born again by his Spirit. I just implore you to please cry out to him to ask him, either if you've been considering and have just held back, let go and just fall into Jesus' arms, because he'll take you where you cannot believe, and it's all for good out of his love for you. And why stay dead in your sins when you can be alive in his arms? That's, I guess, what, and of course also with abortion, if you have struggled with that, find a crisis pregnancy center or a group like that, that you can talk to them and receive the healing that God wants you to have. That's, I think, the two things I would most say. And if they'd like to read my book, which deals with both subjects, I would love it. It's called Naomi, the Rabbi's Wife.
All right. Thank you so much, Mimi, for sharing with us and coming on Tikvah Radio Show. And we'd love to have you back in the future. Maybe you can share a little more about the Naomi book. And that'd be awesome. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Liliana. I appreciate it. I do have one more thing. My husband and I do have a website if people want to go to. It's called everlastinglifeoutreach.com, and it's about our ministry here in South Florida. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Tikvah Radio Show, the voice of hope. If you have been blessed by this program and want to join us in sharing with others the hope of Yeshua HaMashiach, a gift of any amount will be appreciated. You can donate and contact us on our website at tikvahradio.com. Once again, that's TIKVAH radio.com. Thank you for joining us, and God bless.